November 7, 1944, Morville-Lévis, France. The pencil moved across the page of Eloit Friedrich Hartmann's field journal, recording words that contradicted everything the Wehrmacht had been taught about racial hierarchy. These Negro tankers fight with precision we did not expect. Their coordination exceeds many German units I have witnessed. Either our intelligence has failed us completely, or we have been deliberately misled about the capabilities of these soldiers. Through his binoculars, Hartmann had just witnessed something that shattered 3 years of Nazi racial propaganda. Black American tankers were maneuvering Sherman tanks with tactical sophistication that matched or exceeded veteran Wehrmacht panzer crews. An armored thrust broke through German defensive positions in less than 4 hours, forcing a retreat. The efficiency, coordination, and courage displayed on that field stunned even seasoned German officers. In Germany, the party leadership had assured the Wehrmacht that African American soldiers were primitives, incapable of modern warfare, and unable to operate complex machinery. Yet here, in what Nazi ideology had described as America's weakest racial element, black soldiers commanded 30-ton steel machines with deadly efficiency. Their teamwork, communication, and daring assaults proved that skill, training, and courage knew no color. The 761st Tank Battalion, 712 men strong, had just entered combat for the first time. These soldiers, who had trained tirelessly under segregation and skepticism from some American officers, now faced the true test of fire. Every tank movement, every coordinated strike, demonstrated their readiness and resilience. The battlefield became a stage where prejudice crumbled under the force of talent, discipline, and sheer bravery. These men were more than just tankers. They were pioneers, challenging both the enemy abroad and discrimination at home. The Germans had labeled them inferior, but in the smoke and chaos of battle, the 761st proved that courage and competence could not be measured by race. Their story was just beginning, and the next 183 days of nonstop combat would cement their place in history. The 761st Tank Battalion, known as the Black Panthers, had trained relentlessly in the United States, often under the shadow of segregation and skepticism from some white officers. Their arrival in Europe marked a turning point, not just for the war, but for the perception of African American soldiers in combat. Despite doubts about their abilities, these men were determined to prove themselves on the battlefield. Their first mission took them through the rolling farmlands of France, where German forces still clung to fortified positions and ambush points. Sherman tanks rumbled through narrow lanes, the crews communicating with hand signals and radio calls, their eyes scanning for threats. Unlike previous units, the 761st had been trained to operate in small, flexible teams, emphasizing speed, coordination, and aggressive maneuvers. Every decision mattered, and every moment carried the weight of proving their worth. In the first engagement, the battalion encountered a German defensive line near a small village. Mortars and machine gun fire tore through the fields, but the tankers advanced methodically, covering each other and coordinating their attacks. One tank would provide suppressive fire while another maneuvered to flank enemy positions. The Germans, accustomed to facing slower, less coordinated American units, were caught off guard by the precision and audacity of the 761st. Within hours, they had broken through the defensive line, forcing the enemy to retreat and leaving the village in American hands. The success was not without cost. Tanks were damaged, and several soldiers were wounded in the process. Yet even in the face of casualties, the crews pressed forward, demonstrating resilience and an unwavering commitment to each other. First Lieutenant Paul Bates, one of the unit's officers, later recalled, "Every time a tank went down, we worked to get it back into the fight. There was no hesitation. We had trained for this, and we trusted each other to keep moving forward." Beyond the battlefield, the 761st faced the persistent shadow of prejudice. Some American units still doubted their abilities, questioning whether black soldiers could handle the rigors of frontline combat. But every engagement told a different story. Observers, both allies and enemies, saw men executing maneuvers with a skill and bravery that demanded respect. Newspapers and field reports began to take notice, cautiously praising the battalion's accomplishments, while the Germans, initially dismissive, were forced to acknowledge the threat posed by these black tankers. Morale within the unit was fueled not just by victories, but by the knowledge that they were challenging stereotypes with every maneuver. Each successful assault, each coordinated attack, was a statement against the systemic discrimination they had faced at home and within the military itself. Their unity and discipline created a sense of purpose that carried them through the toughest battles. As the 761st pushed deeper into occupied territories, their reputation grew. Villages liberated, bridges secured, and enemy positions destroyed, all contributed to a legacy of courage and tenacity. The battalion was no longer just a segregated unit. They had become a formidable fighting force, respected by allies and feared by enemies. The first days of combat set the tone for what would follow. Over the next 183 days, the 761st would fight non-stop, facing brutal weather, relentless German resistance, and the constant threat of ambush. But their early victories proved one undeniable truth. Skill, courage, and coordination were not determined by race. And for the men of the 761st, every challenge was an opportunity to write history with their tanks and their valor. By late November 1944, the 761st Tank Battalion had begun to establish itself as more than just a symbolic unit. They were no longer merely proving their worth against prejudice, they were proving it in combat. As they moved through France and into Belgium, German resistance intensified, and the battles became increasingly complex. Tank crews navigated narrow village streets, muddy fields, and dense forests, often under artillery fire and aerial attacks. One notable engagement occurred near the small town of Hatton. German forces had fortified positions along every approach, placing anti-tank weapons and machine guns in strategic locations. Many believed the American tanks would struggle in the confined, treacherous terrain. Yet the 761st demonstrated remarkable coordination. Sherman tanks moved in pairs and groups, using flanking maneuvers, smoke screens, and synchronized suppressive fire. Crew members shouted commands over roaring engines, their training translating into life-saving action. For some soldiers, these moments were terrifying. Inside the steel hulls, heat, noise, and fear tested both nerves and endurance. Private First Class Clarence Johnson recalled, "You could hear the bullets pinging off the armor, smell the smoke, and feel every explosion. But the men next to you, your brothers in the tank, gave you the courage to keep going. You weren't alone out there." Despite the intensity of combat, the 761st adapted quickly. Lessons learned from earlier missions were applied immediately. Tanks that might have become vulnerable were constantly repositioned, and crews developed signals and shorthand to communicate across the battlefield. Their agility and innovation allowed them to overcome obstacles that might have trapped less experienced units. The Germans, initially dismissive of the battalion, began to take note. Reports from the field described Black American tankers maneuvering with skill unexpected in any American unit and engaging with relentless efficiency that outmatched veteran Panzer crews. For soldiers of the 761st, these acknowledgments were not sought for personal pride. They were validation of their training, discipline, and unwavering courage in the face of both the enemy and prejudice. Yet the challenges were far from over. German forces escalated their counterattacks, employing ambushes and mines to slow the advance. Tankers frequently had to operate in isolation, protecting infantry and maintaining momentum against fortified positions. Each mission tested the physical and mental limits of the men, but also reinforced their reputation for reliability under extreme conditions. These battles were more than military engagements. They were statements. Every tank maneuver, every cleared obstacle, and every successful mission demonstrated that these soldiers could perform at the highest level, regardless of the color of their skin. The 761st were dismantling decades of bias and proving that courage and skill could not be measured by race. As the battalion pressed forward, they became a symbol of resilience and determination. Their actions were inspiring not just to fellow soldiers, but to the civilian world back home, even as the war continued to rage across Europe. Through fire and steel, the 761st Tank Battalion was cementing a legacy that would endure long after the last shell had been fired. By December 1944, the 761st Tank Battalion had earned a reputation as relentless and precise. But the challenges ahead would push them to the limits. The battalion was tasked with some of the most dangerous missions in the European theater, advancing through heavily fortified German positions, supporting infantry under fire, and navigating terrain riddled with mines and obstacles. Every decision could mean life or death, and the enemy was well aware of their growing reputation. On one mission near the French-German border, a squad of Sherman tanks moved through a narrow forested pass. German panzer units lay in wait, ready to ambush. The battalion responded with speed, coordination, and tactical ingenuity. Tanks flanked enemy positions, while infantry advanced under their cover. Smoke screens were deployed to obscure movements, and radio communications kept every crew informed of threats and changing battlefield conditions. It was a masterclass in armored warfare under extreme pressure. Even in the chaos of battle, the human element remained central. Soldiers relied on one another to survive. Crew members checked each other's tanks, shared ammunition, and provided encouragement when nerves threatened to falter. Sergeant James Cole later recalled, "When you're in a Sherman under fire, you learn quickly that your life depends on the man next to you. You don't just fight for yourself, you fight for him, for your tank, and for the battalion." The Germans, who once dismissed the 761st as inferior, were now recording field reports in disbelief. Enemy officers noted the extraordinary coordination and daring maneuvers of black tank crews who refused to retreat, even under heavy fire. Hartmann's earlier observations were no longer exceptional. They were the norm. Amid the battle's intensity, the soldiers occasionally glimpsed moments of humanity and reflection. Letters home were written between missions, short pauses in a relentless campaign. Families learned of courage, fear, and camaraderie firsthand. And as the men pressed forward through villages and forests, the symbolic weight of their service became clear. They were not only fighting the enemy but challenging systemic prejudice, proving the world wrong one mission at a time. Before we move on to what happens next, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this, and comment below where you're watching from. These men had already defied expectations, but their greatest tests were still ahead. As December turned into January 1945, the 761st Tank Battalion faced increasingly formidable German defenses. Every mission tested their training, resilience, and ingenuity. The battalion was now a seasoned unit, yet the intensity of combat never diminished. Villages fortified with bunkers, machine gun nests, and concealed anti-tank obstacles demanded careful planning and precise execution. In one pivotal operation near Haguenau, the 761st had to breach a heavily defended sector of the Siegfried Line. Sherman tanks advanced under fire, coordinating with infantry squads to neutralize enemy positions. One tank would draw attention and suppress the enemy, while another flanked from an unexpected angle. Communication, speed, and trust among the crews were critical. Every maneuver relied on split-second decisions that could mean survival or death. Inside the tanks, soldiers worked tirelessly to maintain control under relentless fire. Gunners adjusted aim through smoke and debris, loaders ensured a steady supply of ammunition, and drivers navigated mud, rubble, and shell craters. Private Thomas Green remembered the moments when a shell struck near his tank. You felt the thud, heard the metal scream, and then kept going. Fear was constant, but stopping wasn't an option. Every man in the tank depended on the others. Despite the danger, the battalion's precision and teamwork consistently outmatched German expectations. Enemy reports described the black tankers as unflinching and remarkably coordinated, forcing even hardened panzer crews to respect their abilities. These victories were not only tactical successes, they were profound statements against the prejudice that had long questioned their competence. The psychological weight of battle was immense. Many soldiers had friends and comrades fall in previous engagements, yet the 761st continued their mission without hesitation. Fatigue, injuries, and harsh winter conditions only intensified the challenge. Tanks were damaged or immobilized, requiring crews to repair under fire or continue the mission with fewer resources. Each obstacle demanded resourcefulness and courage, reinforcing the battalion's reputation for relentless perseverance. Victory in these engagements came at a cost. Casualties mounted, and the men faced the emotional toll of seeing their friends wounded or killed. Yet, in every firefight, they demonstrated resilience, skill, and determination. Their reputation among allies grew, and even skeptical American units began to acknowledge the extraordinary capabilities of the 761st. The battalion's successes were shaping history. Their relentless advance through enemy lines highlighted not only military prowess, but also the transformative power of proving one's worth in the face of discrimination. These men were more than soldiers. They were symbols of courage, determination, and the breaking of barriers that had long constrained them. By the end of these operations, the 761st Tank Battalion had firmly established itself as a force capable of extraordinary feats. Yet even as victories mounted, they knew the campaign was far from over. Each mission brought new dangers, and the challenge of sustaining 183 days of nonstop combat loomed ahead. By February 1945, the 761st Tank Battalion had become a seasoned and battle-hardened unit. Yet the intensity of the war showed no signs of easing. Winter in Europe brought bitter cold, heavy rain, and snow, turning fields and forests into treacherous landscapes. Tanks struggled through mud and ice, their engines straining against frozen terrain, while soldiers fought not only the enemy, but the relentless elements. The battalion was now operating deep in enemy territory, tasked with breaking through German defensive positions that had repelled other units. Each mission required coordination with infantry, artillery, and air support, while maintaining the momentum that had become their hallmark. Sherman tanks, 30-ton behemoths, moved in tight formations, their crews relying on split-second decisions and unshakable trust. Captain Lindsay Moore, one of the battalion's officers, reflected on these days. Every mission tested us, not just our skill but our endurance. Tanks would break down, radios would fail, and yet we had to keep moving. Every man knew the success of the mission depended on all of us working together. Casualties and fatigue were constant companions. Soldiers endured long hours in cramped, noisy tanks, their faces streaked with mud and soot, their bodies aching from the vibrations and jolts of combat. Yet morale remained high, fueled by camaraderie, discipline, and the knowledge that they were proving themselves against both the enemy and prejudice. The Germans, increasingly wary, began to respond with heightened intensity. Ambushes, mines, and anti-tank fire became more frequent. Yet the 761st adapted quickly, employing innovative tactics to overcome obstacles. Tanks would feint, reposition, or fire with coordinated bursts, creating opportunities for infantry to advance. These maneuvers demonstrated a combination of tactical training and on-the-spot ingenuity, the hallmark of a unit fighting for both survival and recognition. Even under the harshest conditions, the battalion's members found ways to support one another. Crews repaired each other's tanks under fire, shared supplies, and rotated duties to maintain operational efficiency. Letters from home, though scarce, reminded them of the world they were defending and the people waiting for them. These months of continuous combat tested every skill and every ounce of courage the soldiers possessed. Their victories were not just tactical, they were symbolic, demonstrating that skill, perseverance, and teamwork transcended racial barriers. By enduring these grueling conditions and emerging victorious, the 761st Tank Battalion cemented a legacy that would be remembered long after the war. The relentless pace of battle forged bonds that could not be broken. Every mission, every mile advanced, every obstacle overcome added to the unit's reputation as unstoppable and fearless. The Germans had underestimated them, and the world was beginning to take notice. By March 1945, the 761st Tank Battalion had earned a reputation as an unstoppable armored force. Yet their most challenging mission was still ahead. Crossing the Rhine River, one of the last major natural barriers protecting the heart of Germany. The river was heavily defended, with artillery, machine guns, and fortified positions lining the banks. For any unit, this would have been a perilous operation. But for the 761st, it was another opportunity to prove their skill and resilience. The battalion moved cautiously through the towns and forests leading to the Rhine, their tanks roaring through narrow streets, engines straining against mud and debris. German forces launched constant counterattacks, using anti-tank weapons, mines, and ambushes to slow their advance. Every maneuver required precision. Tank crews communicated with hand signals, radio calls, and an unspoken understanding built over months of combat. The synchronization was remarkable, each crew anticipating the movements of the others, as though they were a single living machine. In one critical engagement near a village overlooking the Rhine, the battalion faced an enemy ambush that had destroyed previous American units. Sherman tanks returned fire with coordinated volleys, while infantry supported the advance, clearing buildings and fortifications. Crew members worked under immense pressure, gunners adjusting aim through smoke, loaders supplying ammunition in cramped, hot conditions, and drivers maneuvering over debris-strewn terrain. Each action had to be precise, or the mission and lives would be lost. The psychological strain was immense. Soldiers had been fighting nonstop for months, facing fatigue, injuries, and loss of comrades. Yet the 761st pressed forward with determination. The bond between men in the tanks was unbreakable, forged in fire, fear, and shared purpose. Sergeant Thomas Williams later reflected, "Every time we crossed another obstacle, survived another ambush, it wasn't just the tanks that kept us moving. It was knowing that the men next to you had your back." The Germans, who had once labeled the battalion inferior, were forced to acknowledge their skill. Reports described the black tankers as relentless, precise, and fearless. A unit that not only matched, but often exceeded the capabilities of veteran German armored divisions. The crossing of the Rhine marked a turning point in the battalion's campaign, demonstrating their ability to operate under the most intense pressure while maintaining tactical excellence. Victory came at a cost. Tanks were damaged, crews were injured, and some lives were lost. Yet each success reinforced the battalion's legacy. A group of men underestimated by their own country and by their enemy, proving through skill, courage, and perseverance that they belonged on the front lines. By the time the 761st reached the eastern bank of the Rhine, their reputation was solidified. They had demonstrated that race could never determine courage or competence in battle. The crossing was more than a military victory. It was a symbolic triumph, an undeniable statement that the men of the 761st Tank Battalion were equal to any challenge the war could throw at them. After crossing the Rhine, the 761st Tank Battalion pushed deeper into the heart of Germany. Every mile forward brought new challenges: heavily mined roads, fortified towns, and pockets of desperate German resistance. The battalion moved like a well-oiled machine, Sherman tanks rumbling through villages, forests, and open fields, each crew performing with precision born from months of non-stop combat. One of the most harrowing missions came near the town of Pforzheim. German forces had fortified the city, laying traps and positioning snipers and machine gun nests throughout the streets. The battalion's orders were clear: break through, support infantry, and secure the area. Sherman tanks moved in synchronized formations, with crews constantly adjusting to the shifting battlefield. Gunners suppressed enemy fire, loaders kept ammunition flowing, and drivers navigated debris-littered streets with incredible skill. The men worked as one, anticipating threats before they emerged. During the advance, the battalion encountered resistance that tested both courage and strategy. German tanks and artillery engaged them at close range. Mines and obstacles threatened to immobilize the Sherman tanks. Yet the 761st adapted quickly, employing creative tactics such as smoke screens, flanking maneuvers, and combined arms coordination with infantry. Every engagement showcased their ability to stay calm under pressure and maintain cohesion in the chaos of battle. Despite their success, the human cost was heavy. Crews faced fatigue, injuries, and the emotional toll of seeing comrades fall. But the bonds forged in these tanks were unbreakable. Each man depended on the others, trusting that his survival and the success of the mission depended on teamwork. The psychological resilience of the battalion was as impressive as their tactical skill. The Germans, once dismissive of these black tankers, now regarded them with fear and respect. Enemy reports described their relentless, precise, and fearless operations. Villages that had been expected to resist for days fell within hours under the battalion's advance. The 761st was proving that skill. Discipline and courage were not defined by race. They were defined by training, determination, and unity. Before we move on to what happens next, make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from World War II and comment below where you're watching from. These men had already defied expectations repeatedly, but the battles ahead would push them further than ever before. Each victory strengthened not only the reputation of the 761st, but also the morale of Allied forces witnessing their success. News of their achievements spread through the ranks, inspiring soldiers who faced prejudice or doubt in their own units. The battalion had become a symbol of excellence, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of victory against both human and societal obstacles. As the 761st pressed forward, they continued to balance tactical brilliance with human endurance. The months of combat, the intensity of each engagement, and the constant threat of death forged a legacy that could never be erased. By the end of this campaign, the 761st would not just be remembered as a tank battalion. They would be remembered as a force that broke barriers and redefined what courage truly meant. By March 1945, the 761st Tank Battalion had been in continuous combat for months, their reputation preceding them wherever they advanced. Yet their most grueling missions were still ahead. The battalion was tasked with leading armored assaults into the German heartland, confronting entrenched positions, and supporting infantry through towns and cities that had been fortified for years. Every mission tested their skill, courage, and endurance to the maximum. The battalion approached the town of Heilbronn, a strategic location with heavily defended streets, bridges, and buildings. German forces, aware of the 761st's effectiveness, had reinforced the area with anti-tank weapons, artillery, and ambush points. Sherman tanks moved cautiously through narrow streets, engines straining against rubble and debris, while gunners scanned every window, doorway, and rooftop for enemy fire. Crews relied on months of training and instinct, each action precise and coordinated. Communication between tanks was critical. Radio calls, hand signals, and prearranged tactics allowed the battalion to maintain formation and suppress enemy fire effectively. One tank would provide covering fire, while another maneuvered to flank the enemy. Infantry closely followed, clearing buildings and securing paths for the armored advance. The operation demanded split-second decisions and flawless teamwork, as any hesitation could result in disaster. The human cost remained immense. Soldiers faced fatigue, injuries, and the mental strain of witnessing comrades fall. Yet the bond among the men was unbreakable. Each tank crew relied on the others for survival, creating a unity that was both tactical and deeply personal. Sergeant David Freeman later recalled, "Every time we moved forward, we weren't just fighting the Germans, we were fighting for each other. That trust kept us alive more than any armor ever could." The Germans, who had once dismissed the 761st as inferior, were now forced to acknowledge their skill and tenacity. Reports described the battalion as fearless, disciplined, and unmatched in armored warfare. Cities that had been expected to resist for days fell quickly under the 761st's relentless advance. Their success was a testament not only to training and courage, but also to the determination to prove themselves in the face of prejudice and doubt. Before we move on to the conclusion, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories from World War II and comment where you're watching from. The battalion had defied expectations at every turn, but their final days in combat would solidify their legacy. As the 761st pressed on, their accomplishments were recognized by both allies and enemies. They liberated towns, destroyed enemy positions, and provided critical support to infantry operations. Beyond their tactical victories, they shattered long-standing racial stereotypes, proving that courage, skill, and leadership knew no color. The battalion's final engagements were not just battles, they were statements. Statements about resilience, teamwork, and the ability to overcome both human and societal obstacles. By the end of the campaign, the 761st had proven that they were among the finest armored units in the European theater, leaving a legacy that would endure far beyond the war. As April 1945 approached, the 761st Tank Battalion had completed 183 days of non-stop combat, earning a place in history that few units could claim. Their campaigns had spanned France, Belgium, and into Germany, facing some of the fiercest resistance of World War II. Each mission had tested their courage, skill, and endurance, yet they had consistently proven themselves superior to expectations, both their own and those of skeptics at home and abroad. The battalion's successes were not only military, but symbolic. They shattered entrenched racial prejudices, demonstrating that ability, bravery, and leadership were not determined by the color of one's skin. Their tanks had rolled into fortified towns, crossed rivers under fire, and provided critical support to infantry, all while enduring fatigue, injury, and the constant threat of death. Every victory strengthened the battalion's reputation, inspiring soldiers across the Allied forces and sending a powerful message to the world. Before we conclude, make sure to subscribe for more incredible World War II stories and comment below where you're watching from. The men of the 761st had defied expectations repeatedly, and their story deserves to be remembered. Today, the 761st Tank Battalion stands as a testament to perseverance, teamwork, and courage under fire. They proved that honor and skill can overcome prejudice, and their legacy continues to inspire generations. From their first engagement in France to their final push into Germany, they left a mark on history that goes far beyond the battlefield. Their story reminds us that bravery and excellence are universal, and that true heroes rise not only through victories, but through the obstacles they overcome. The 761st Tank Battalion will forever be remembered, not just for the battles they fought, but for the barriers they broke, the courage they displayed, and the inspiration they continue to provide to soldiers and civilians alike.